The pod was still warm when I cut it open, and the girl inside it didn't cry. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the ash-grey skin, not the ears tapering up into points, not the eyes too big for her face. She didn't cry, and she didn't flinch from the cutting torch, and when the seal finally gave and the cold air of the lower tunnel hit her, she just looked at me like she was waiting to find out what kind of thing I was. I'd been 30 years in the mines on Kesson Drift, and I'd hauled a lot of wreckage out of the dark. Most of it didn't look back at you. Easy, I said, though I doubt she had the words for it. Easy now. Her ship had come down 2 days before, what was left of it, scattered across the upper ridge in pieces too small to tell you what it used to be. The drift sensors had caught the tail end of the burn. Something hit that ship hard, out past the rings, and it limped in trailing fire before it broke apart on entry. Nobody official came looking. Out here, on a half-stripped mining moon nobody important remembered existed. That wasn't unusual. Wrecks came down. We salvaged what we could and buried the rest in silence, because silence was cheaper than questions. I should have called it in. Standard protocol, foreign wreckage, possible survivors, report to the company administrator, let her decide. Instead I wrapped the girl in my own coat, which swallowed her whole, and carried her up through 4 levels of tunnel to my quarters, and told myself I'd report it in the morning. I never did report it. That's the part one still turn over some nights. She didn't speak our language and I didn't speak hers, but she ate when I put food in front of her, and on the 3rd night she fell asleep sitting upright against my arm like she'd decided, provisionally, that I wasn't a danger. I named her Tam Sin, after nobody. It was just a name I liked, plain and easy to say, and she answered to it within a week like she'd always had it. I told myself this was temporary. A foreman doesn't keep an alien child in his quarters. But the company that ran Kesson Drift had stopped paying real attention to us years back, once the good ore ran thin, and the colony had learned to handle its own business. Nobody asked me hard questions about the girl who started showing up at the mess hall. They asked easy ones. What's her name? How old is she? Does she like the stew? And I answered those, and the rest went quiet the way most things did out here. It stayed quiet for 40 days. Then a transport that wasn't ours put down on the upper pad, and 3 of them stepped off it wearing clothes too clean for a mining moon, and asked for me by name. They were her people. That much I understood inside the first minute, from the way the girl went rigid at my side and gripped 2 fingers of my hand hard enough to whiten her own knuckles. The lead one introduced himself as Castle Vaughan, spoke our language smooth as oil, and laid it out plain. The girl was the last surviving carrier of something in her blood his people's dying soil needed. Some inherited compound their failing crops couldn't synthesize anymore without it. Her bloodline. Her, specifically, the only one left after the attack that took a ship. She is owed to her people, Vaughan said, not abandoned to a stranger's mercy. Funny, I said. She didn't look owed to anybody when I found her. Looked left. Vaughan's smile didn't move much. The ship that fell was fleeing an attack on the Bloodline Sanctuary. We are the ones who escaped to retrieve her. I didn't believe him. I want to be honest about that, because the rest of this only makes sense if you know I didn't believe him from the first sentence. There's a way a man talks about a child when he means to keep her safe, and there's a way he talks about her when he means to keep what's inside her, and Vaughan's voice never once changed register between the two. I told him I'd think on it. He said he'd give me a day. He did not give me a day. That night the girl wouldn't sleep. She sat at the window of my quarters with her knees drawn up, watching the dark where the transport sat lit up on the pad, and when I asked her, uselessly, in words she didn't have, what was wrong, she did the thing she'd never done before. She reached up and touched the 2 fingers she always held of mine, and then pointed at herself, and then made a small flat gesture with her other hand, like wiping something off a table. Gone. Done with. Discarded. I understood her better in that one gesture than in 40 days of feeding her. They hadn't come to rescue a lost child. They'd come because their own world was dying and she was the last working part of the machine that could fix it, and a part doesn't get asked what it wants. Whatever happened to the rest of her bloodline, whoever attacked that ship, I didn't think it was strangers. I thought it was politics. I thought somebody on her side had let that sanctuary fall, maybe arranged for it to fall, and was very interested in being the one who delivered her home afterward, hero of the hour, holder of the cure. In the morning Vaughan came back with 2 more men and considerably less smoothness in his voice. The girl will board the transport, he said. This isn't a request the colony has standing to refuse. She belongs to a sovereign people, and you are one miner on a leased rock. She's not a length of cable, Vaughn. You don't requisition her. You have no claim. I didn't say I had a claim. I kept my voice level, the way you keep your hands steady around something that might go off. I said you're not taking her out of that door. He looked at the door like it had personally insulted him, then past me, into the mess hall behind, where it was breakfast hour and 40-some miners had gone very quiet over their trays, watching. You'll stand in front of an armed escort, he said, alone, over a child who isn't yours. I'd thought about that exact sentence most of the night. I had an answer ready, and it wasn't bravery, because bravery is what you call it after it works. It was just the only thing that felt like it wouldn't make me sick to live with afterward. I won't be alone, I said, and turned to the mess hall, and asked. I didn't make a speech. I'm not a speech-making man. I said, this girl's been eating at our table for 40 days, and these men want to take her off this moon to be used for parts, and I mean to stand in that doorway, and I'd take it as a kindness if some of you stood there with me. Nobody moved for 3 long seconds, and I felt my stomach drop the way it does in a fast lift. Then Aramis Kosei, who ran the second shift drill crew and had never said 6 words to me that weren't about quotas, stood up and walked to the door and stood beside me with his arms crossed. Then his crew stood. Then the cooks came out from behind the counter, still in their aprons, and stood. By the time it was done, there were better than 30 of us crowded into that doorway and the hall behind it. No weapons drawn, nothing but bodies and stillness, a wall made of people who mined ore for a living and had decided, on no authority but their own, that this was a thing worth a wall. Vaughn's men had rifles. I want to be honest about that too. They had rifles, and we had nothing but each other, and for a long, ugly minute I thought I'd just gotten 30 people killed over a girl I'd known 6 weeks. But Vaughn hadn't come to start a massacre on a leased company moon with a transport full of witnesses and a story that wouldn't survive contact with anyone back home who still had a conscience. He'd come for an easy extraction, a quiet handover, paperwork, and a clean exit. What he found instead was 40 miners worth of mess that would need explaining to people who might ask harder questions than I had, and a man who held the moons only working a load of controls, who'd already quietly told his second that if those men set one boot wrong, the upper pad's gravity clamps were going offline whether the transport liked it or not. He weighed it. I watched him weigh it, the way you watch a man at a card table decide the pot isn't worth the hand he's holding. This will be reported, he said, which was the closest thing to a retreat he had words for. Report it, I said. Tell them a moon full of miners wouldn't hand over a child to men who wouldn't say her name. He hadn't, in the whole conversation. Not once. They left within the hour. The transport burned a hard climb out, and I half expected it to swing back around with worse intentions, but it didn't, and 3 days later word came down a back channel that Vaughn's faction had lost its standing back home over the sanctuary's fall. Somebody else's investigation, somebody else's reckoning, nothing to do with us. Whatever he'd hoped to deliver, he delivered nothing, and that was its own kind of ending. Tamsin still doesn't talk much, even now, 3 years on. She talks enough. She calls Aramis the loud one in our language, which is decided he loves, and she's got opinions about the mess hall stew she didn't used to have, and some nights she still sits at that window the way she did the night before they came, except now it's just watching, not waiting. I never did find out exactly what her blood was worth to a dying world soil, and I've stopped trying to learn it. It was never the thing worth protecting. She was. People ask me sometimes, the few who know the story, why 30 miners stood in a doorway for a girl half of them had barely spoken to. I don't have a clever answer. I think it's just that we'd all, every one of us, spent our lives being treated like parts on a ledger by people who never bothered to learn our names either. We knew exactly what that looked like from the inside. We weren't about to hand a child into it. She still holds 2 of my fingers when she's nervous. I don't expect that to change for a good while yet, and I find I don't want it to.